morning, everyone. My name is Celia Marie Rodriguez, and I'm a member of the Student National Education Association. I will be serving as the facilitator for tonight's section, and I will be monitoring the chat box throughout. My co-host tonight is Bianca Melendez. Before we continue, I would like to go over a few housekeeping rules. Please keep your microphone mute unless informed otherwise. Type all your questions into the chat box, and there will be time during the presentation dedicated to questions from the chat box. Today's presentation will be led by Mike Alba and Patricia Fontan from Brevard County Schools. Without further ado, the School of Teacher Education and Students National Education Association presents what is FERPA and what is important for me to know before I have my own classroom.
All right, thank you so much, guys. I see some familiar pictures and names from our last session that we did last week. So welcome back, and then for you new individuals, we're happy to have you here for this topic. And I know this is might be a challenging topic. You're probably thinking in your heads there are probably a lot of different things that you think you want to know, and FERPA probably is not on the top 10 of your list. But trust me, when it comes down to it and the work, it is probably something that you want to be familiar with, and you'll be glad that you had spent some time with us this evening before you start your new career in a school. So we are, I'm certain that you'll find our time together valuable when the presentation is done, and that you'll be glad you had the information before you start off and you get your own classroom and all the responsibilities that comes with that. Again, my name is Mike Alba. I'm the Director of Professional Learning and Development here in Brevard County. And I know, again, most of you guys were here, but just in case, Brevard is to the east of you all. We're in the, by Cocoa Beach and Titusville and Cape Canaveral, all those fun areas. We have about 73,000 students. We have about 87 schools. So we're one of the 10th largest districts in Florida. So we're definitely not as big as Orange County. So again, just as I said the last session, just encourage you to do your research. Make sure that you find the district and county that fits your needs and your personalities. I think we're very proud of our smaller community schools. High schools, middle schools, and elementary schools are all fairly good size, manageable, and they're community schools. So if you want to have work in a place where you can be invested in the community and people know you, and you're not just another one of the hundreds or so teachers in one place, you might want to check us out. Go to our website and all that kind of fun stuff. I think I did with the last time, and again, I was able to hear a little bit from you and kind of your background, but I think Dr. Fontan would probably benefit from just hearing who the audience is for today. So I think I'll go around and do the same thing we did the last time. So I'm going to call you guys out. So when I call your name, if you can unmute and then just say just kind of what year you are in the program, and then what you're going into as far as what you plan to teach, elementary, secondary, and so forth. So I'm just going to call out the people I see, and hopefully you're actually there and not just tuned in and maybe walking your dog or something. So we're going to see who's actually here. So I am going to start with Lucia. So if you can unmute and just kind of share those things.
Hi, my name's Lucia Belleville. I'm a junior and I'm majoring in elementary education.
Thank you. And Jaden.
Hi, I'm Jaden Manfredi. I am a freshman and I am majoring in elementary education.
Perfect, thank you. And Tatiana?
Hi, I'm Tatiana Fendora. I'm a senior and I am in elementary education.
Thank you. Megan?
Hi, my name is Megan. I'm a freshman and my major is secondary mathematics education.
Perfect. And Shayna?
Hello, my name is Shayna. I am a junior intern and I am elementary education major.
Thank you. And Lex, I see you next.
Hi, my name is Alexa and I'm an elementary ed major too.
Thank you. And Victoria?
Hi, I'm Victoria Chen-Fan, and I think I'm a junior, and I'm in elementary education.
Yes, I have I think junior daughter as well, so I'm right there with you. I'm not really sure where she is right now. I don't know why it's so hard sometimes to figure it out, but it is sometimes. Avila.
My name is Zuleika Avila, and my major is elementary education.
Mike, I think you skip a Victoria. There's two.
I know, sometimes when they talk, it jumps around. So I was like, oh boy, I'm going to totally lose track of who I've talked to. So Victoria, I know I talked to.
So she'll be Victoria Marshall now.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Hi, I'm Victoria Marshall. I'm a sophomore and I'm an elementary education major.
Perfect, thank you, Victoria. Sorry for skipping you. And Alexa, I think we have two Alexas, right? It's spelled differently, but we'll do Alexa P first.
Hello, I'm Alexa Poulter. I think I'm a senior and I'm in secondary education focusing on English.
Hi, awesome. And Mackenzie.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie. I'm a senior and I'm planning on going to school to be a kindergarten teacher.
Awesome, fantastic. And then I have another Alexa Gregory. Are you on? All right, and then Megan Rhodes, I see your name. Are you able to unmute and share a little bit about yourselves? All right, I hope the monitors are keeping track of who is really here. Hey, Carly, I see you just popped in. Could you just share kind of where you are as far as year and your, if you're going elementary, secondary?
Hi, I'm Carly. I'm a junior and I'm going to elementary education.
Perfect. And Jaden, are you there? No. And Victoria?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, thanks. Oh, sorry. When you changed it, you changed positions on me. And then Victoria, did I call you out already?
Yeah, she already said Victoria.
All right. And then maybe I should just say anybody else who has not been able to share out, if you can unmute. Sarah? Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, my name is Sarah Goodell, and I'm a senior at UCF, and I'm currently studying secondary education in ELA.
Awesome, awesome. A couple English teachers.
And I am, hello. I'm Naomi. I'm a secondary education major, mathematics education track. I'm in my senior year right now.
Fantastic. And Chantel, I think you tried to unmute.
Yes. Hi, I'm Chantel Reese. I'm studying elementary education and I'm in my junior year.
Awesome, thank you. Is that everybody? All right, fantastic. Thank you guys so much. It's just, I think it's just nice to know there is someone behind all these pictures when we start speaking. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Patricia Fontan. She is one of the directors in student services. We can go on and on with just all the responsibilities that she has, but she is a phenomenal resource to have, for our teachers and our administrators. She is a wealth of information, wealth of knowledge, incredibly smart. So I'm going to turn it over to her and have her share what she knows about FERPA.
So since you guys shared a little bit about yourself, I'll kind of tell you my path. I was hoping I was going to hear somebody was studying exceptional student education, but I didn't hear that. We are in need of exceptional student education teachers if anybody's still interested. But I've been in Brevard County, this is my 25th year. I started off as an exceptional student education teacher. I actually started off in Houston, Texas. I taught there for 3 years. I moved to Melbourne, to Brevard, actually, because my brother went to FIT and he relocated here with his family. So I kind of decided to be closer to family. I would have never thought I would have ended up here. In Brevard, I pretty much have taught ESE, pretty much elementary in Brevard. I've done inclusion, resource, self-contained. Any student with any type of disability I taught at one point or another. I then became what we call an ESE staffing specialist here, which is more of the legal compliance in regards to following the IDEA and Section 504. And that's going to be a person that when you, no matter where you go in Florida, pretty much, there's going to be an ESE staffing specialist at your school. Their names may change a little bit, but there's always somebody there who's in charge of compliance and ensuring that we're following students' IEPs and making sure that parents, if they're having issues, they can address that with them. In Brevard, then I went ahead and moved kind of like to the assistant director for exceptional student education. And this is my 6th year as the director. I love what I do, but it's very legal compliance. I will tell you, when I was in college, if you would have told me when I was in college, when I want to become a teacher, that I was going to end up in administration in this position, I would have laughed at everybody and said that's not going to happen. So one thing I learned when I started teaching, there are so many positions and jobs within education that I had no idea until I started getting into education. So you'll learn really quickly, and there's different career paths that you can take within education that I wasn't aware until I started teaching and looking at different things. So always keep eyes open and look out, in any new opportunity, take advantage of it. You never know where you're going to end up leading. Some of my decisions were made because somebody encouraged me to go get a master's in educational leadership. I thought, okay, I'll do that, not thinking that long term that was going to be a big opening door to other positions in the district. So just keep everything open when you start teaching. What I'm going to be talking about is more legal compliance, because that's kind of what I do. And FERPA, which is student confidentiality, is a huge one. It's starting to become bigger and bigger now with virtual platforms. We're starting to get more and more complaints in regards to sharing student confidentiality. Social media has blown it up also. What I'm going to be sharing with you, I will tell you, it's federal law that has not caught up to social media, has not caught up to virtual learning. So we depend on a lot of court cases, rulings that we're still waiting to see to determine if any procedures need to be changed. So we're going to go over the federal law and the primary things, but this is ever changing. Every time a parent files a complaint, files a lawsuit, we get a different ruling from a judge, and then we all scramble to change our procedures. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to share my screen, and you're going to hopefully see a presentation. And hopefully it's so. And please tell me if you can see that. Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Yes, we can see it.
And is it changing? Let's see. Is it changing slides? Yes.
Yes.
So pretty much, this is FERPA, and it kind of gives you an idea. Again, it's a Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It's a federal law that protects the rights of students' records. Any record that directly ties to a student is protected by FERPA. So we're talking about anything, pretty much any record in the school environment is somehow protected by FERPA. We as school districts are required to annually notify parents of this federal law and their rights to review records, and any records that they may want to request from their students, they can have access to. And any school, any pretty much agency that receives any federal funds is required to follow this federal law. So what does pretty much FERPA do? It pretty much grants parents the rights of their children to review those records until the student turns 18. At that point, those rights may transfer to the student unless, and this is the big one because we get this a lot in high school, unless the parents claim children dependence on their taxes. So if you're going into secondary school, you will owe at least once in your career, you will deal with an 18-year-old who's a senior, and they will try to tell you that you can't call their parent or you can't show their report cards to their parents because they're legal now and they have the right to their records. And the next question that we usually ask the student is, do you pay taxes, or is your parent claiming you on your taxes? And as long as the parents are claiming them on their taxes, the parents still have the right to see the student's records. And it's funny because we get a senior or two every year in the district who tries to file something or complain that Why are we notifying their parents about their progress in school? And we have to sit down with the student and explain to them, but at least I'm glad that they know what FERPA is and what it means to them. So it's pretty much anything that the parents have the right to see. Parents also have the right to inspect those records. And we'll talk about how those records impact you and what you need to be aware of. So the parents can inspect and review any of the records. They can challenge any of those records. If they don't agree with what's in a student's record, any statement, the big one that we get challenged sometime is comments on progress report cards that teachers make. Those are always a big one, and sometimes parents challenge what the teacher wrote in the comments, and there's procedures that we would have to go through to determine if we're gonna change that record or not. And then if we're to share any information about our student with anybody outside of the organization, we have to get written consent. So we can't just be taking students' report card and sharing it with anybody else, posting it on social media. We just have to be very aware that that is their student's educational record, and we have to be aware of those protections. So what are those records? Pretty much, I will tell you as a teacher, anything that's in the school that has a student name, student ID, date of birth, that all becomes an educational record. And we can't share that without anybody else unless we have parental consent. Nowadays, you'll get into a lot of custody issues, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, when there's two parents in the picture, and they each have rights, and you have to determine what are you supposed to share with what parent. And that gets a little complicated, and that's when your school administrators would need to jump in. But if the records are maintained at the school. If you've been to a school, which I'm assuming some of you already observed, usually there are the Q folder and the audit files, what everybody thinks of. And those are usually housed in a secure room somewhere in the school building. And as teachers, you're only allowed to view the records for your students. You shouldn't be going in and looking at other students' records at the school. It should only be the records of the students that you're assigned to. The principal is in charge of the custodian of all the records. They need to make sure they're maintained properly. They need to make sure they're in secure locked location in the building. They can't just have records laying around in the teacher's lounge. It all needs to be in a specific location, and it's the school principal's responsibility to make sure in compliance with those records. So there are some records that are not considered educational records, but you have to be careful for it. And I'll give you an example that happens a lot. Sometimes as a teacher, you're gonna make personal notes in regards to a student, just as a memory aid, something to remind yourself to do something later on, but it's something that you wrote, it's only for you, your personal notes, and nobody else has seen. Those parents do not have to have access to, unless the parent can prove that you've shown those records to somebody else. So the minute you show that record of what you wrote to somebody else, it becomes an educational record. The biggest one, I will tell you as a director, when you go to meetings, let's say you are assigned and you're gonna go to IEP meetings, which you will if you're in an elementary or secondary, and you're sitting at an IEP meeting and you start passing notes, and I've seen teachers do this a lot, pass a note to somebody else at the meeting. Anybody at that point can ask for what the notice said. The parent can request for that note and put it in the student's file. And I will tell you sometimes what the notes are saying are not the most appropriate thing, and we don't want those to be shared. So always be careful of your notes. If you keep them and they're yours, that's good. But if the minute you share them, at any point, anybody can request those records. We have a lot of SROs and security specialists on our campus. And some of the records are not considered educational records, only if they're used for law enforcement reasons. But if they're part of a disciplinary action, they wrote something up, and then the school is using that information to look at a disciplinary action, that will then become an educational record. Again, when kids and grading becomes an issue, and we'll talk about making sure your grades They're not public knowledge. You're not sharing grades about other students because parents can complain that you've been sharing identifiable information about their student. So there's certain things that we can share, and that's called directory information. There's some information that we can share without the parent's permission. Every school district probably handles this a little bit different. Here in Brevard, when parents enroll their student, they have to fill out this form where at the bottom of the form, it talks about release of directory information. And we have to get permission from the parent to share. Can we share this? This is some information that we will share. Examples of this may be a newspaper article is doing an article on the football team at one of our high schools and their GPA. Well, we may be able to share their GPA and if the parent has signed the form and give us permission, but we have to be aware there's some parents don't want even that information published. They don't want anybody to know that their child's on the football team or what their GPA is. So a lot of that, the school administration would have to be aware of who's able to release information and who's not able to release information. We are required to get some kind of consent. Every year, the parent has to say either yes or no. So we always have to get that consent. So we always tell administrators be aware of it and always pay attention. We've talked to administrators. There's usually very few parents who are going to say no. So we usually tell them keep a list of all the ones that have said no and keep it handy. So it's easily, you can look at it and make any determination when you get requests from information. So other than that, any other information cannot be released unless we have some kind of consent. And we need to make sure that any information that we share, it has to be legitimate and academic. And I'll give you some examples that gets us into trouble. Teacher lounges always gets us into trouble. Sometimes teachers are in the lounge and they're having lunch. And sometimes information is being shared about students that's probably inappropriate. And they're naming names. They're talking about the student and they're talking to another peer who does not have that student in the class, may not even know the student, but now the teacher is sharing information about maybe their disability or their services on the IEP or what their grades are. And that's a violation of FERPA. So we always have to be careful what we share and who do we share with. We all have stories as teachers. I have plenty of stories when I was an ESE teacher. And there are stories that you do want to share, and then they're funny and there's something you want to share. Remove any names of students, remove anything that anybody could identify, the school, the name, anything, but you can still share some information as a social thing without any student information because it does become an issue. And one of the things that I tell teachers that may not realize, in a teacher's lounge, there may be 10 teachers talking, but there's also a parent who's also a teacher and has a child at that school. And if they may be hearing about their own child or maybe hearing about somebody that they know that they don't agree with, and now they're hearing information and they get upset. And usually that's how we find out is other teachers saying, why are they talking about my child when they're not even involved in that class? So be aware. Other things is when we get subpoenas, and we do get subpoenas, we have to release those educational records. We don't need consent from the parent. And health and safety, and that's become a big one right now. COVID-19. Right now, we don't have to get consent from the parents if we identify a student who's a case of COVID-19. We can share that information with the health department, and the health department can then needs that information to do tracing. So because it's a health and safety, we can go ahead and share that information and not need parental consent to share that type of information. Things that you don't want to share and want to talk about: Social Security, gender. Gender has become a big one recently, especially once you get into the high schools. We got to be careful with mentioning of gender. Any discipline, ID, socioeconomic status, Title I status, all this information you will have access to. A lot of the students You will know this information for your students, but it's not for you to share with anybody else. It's in your information because you are the teacher of that student and you have the right to know that type of information. IEP is a big one, talking about students with disabilities. We shouldn't be talking about our disability to somebody who is not a teacher of the student. Race, ethnicity, grades, any status in regards to migrant, homeless, or Medicaid, all of that, you will have access to your students, but it's information that you should not be sharing with anybody else. It's information that is the right for you to know in order to do your job as the teacher. So what are some of the things we kind of recommend? Passwords, especially nowadays, even elementary kids. I will tell you, they're probably better at computers than we are. Kids can get into computers and especially walk by. The big one that I've seen recently is that what they're doing, and I'll give you an example. There was a secondary dean who was doing, working with a student with a disciplinary referral. He left all the paperwork on the desk, went to take a call, came back, had another student there. They had nothing to do with the first one, but there's paperwork about the first student on there and what they did at school. When the dean went out again to make a copy, the student in the room took his phone, took pictures of all the documents, and then posted it on social media. So then we had the parent calling us because she found out about what happened at the school based on this other student posting information about their student in social media. So be aware of, they get really smart on us and they know, make sure your grades and everything is guarded. Keep all your documents in a private location. Don't leave papers on your desk. You never know who comes in. Visitors is a big one. You may have people visiting and walking through schools. Some of them may be parents who may request to do observations. You don't want papers around other students that parents can easily see information about other students. The other big one that you have to remember, know who the legal guardians are of your students. Nowadays, that is not easy to determine. There will be aunts and there will be grandparents and there will be step parents and there will be somebody who's living with the mom, and you need to make sure you know who has the legal guardian who you should be communicating. You will get emails from people all the time asking you, hey, I'm so-and-so and I want to know how he's doing in science class. You need to verify that that person is the legal guardian. You shouldn't be responding just to emails. I know in Brevard, part of their registration, they have to put an email address so we can verify that is the email address of the legal guardian. And if you're not sure, pick up the phone, verify who they are, because you never know who that is. You should always have access, and you should, as a teacher, of any legal paperwork for the students at your school. You will have custody agreements. Nowadays, they actually make it pretty easy for you to identify who's the legal guardian. Another big one, just because a student's primary residence is with one parent, usually the second parent also has legal rights to review records and ask for a copy of a report card. We have a lot of situations where when we send report cards, we send them to 2 different households because both parents have the legal right to know about their child's report card. Not do, again, I talked about this a little bit. Don't leave stuff on public places. Make sure you don't post students' grades. We're really good at this, but we still, sometimes I walk through schools and go, oh, we shouldn't be doing that. Don't have kids distribute kids' homework or grades as graded, because then they'll know who got what grade. And just make sure that you keep everything private and there's information between you and the student. Don't leave your computer unattended. I will tell you, even in my office, I get in a habit. Even though to get to my office, you have to pass through my secretary, I get in a habit that when I get up, even to go to the bathroom or the copier, I lock my computer. Especially because I have 3 screens and you can probably see some information from depending on where you stand on my door, but I try to keep everything logged and making sure that people don't have access to the information in my computer. Make sure you identify the email from the parents. Be careful what you're sending through email. Make sure you're not sending information to the wrong parent or the wrong email address, because now you've shared FERPA information for somebody who does not have the right to know, and the parent can file a complaint. A little bit that I want to talk to you about because of COVID-19 has to do with HIPAA. And this is the Health Information Act. And it gets a little confusing, and you'll hear parents say this to you when we talk about records in the nurse's office. So because the records are housed in our schools and they're in the nurse's office, those are covered under FERPA, and we have the right to access those records. They're not covered under HIPAA. So a lot of the times, and I don't know, every school district's registration is different, but you should be getting a copy of the registration for your students that the parents filled out. On there, the parent will fill out medical information, and then it will document if any information was given to the health clinic, and then you can gather that information in regards to any healthcare plans. Examples, kids with peanut allergies, diabetic, all that information, you should have access to that information. You should be able to know what procedures you need to follow for that student in your class, but that's information that you don't go and share out with anybody else. So you don't post on social media, hey, Jimmy, that's in my 4th grade class, is allergic to peanuts, parents, so don't send anything with peanuts to my classroom. Huge violation. We usually, when we do have students, and we have, every school district will have procedures, when we want to notify parents about allergies in the classroom, it's a very generic letter that we send out to all parents in the classroom, but we don't identify who is the student that has the allergy. That is maintained between you and the student and the student's family. But we all want to be aware of any medical information that pertain to your students, and just ensuring that you don't share that with anybody else. So in the virtual instruction world, we don't know what this is going to look like. We don't know how long e-learning is going to last, but just a lot of the things that we've been telling teachers, especially when we are in e-learning right now and we don't know what's going in the home, what's happening inside. We kind of have taught our kids and our teachers to blur the background. So a lot of our students are doing that. Make sure we're not recording. So right now, as I'm speaking, if I were recording my screen, I can see the participants on my screen. If you had students on there, you would have pictures of students. You shouldn't be recording with students in there. It should only be whatever your presentation is. So we tell teachers, if you're going to record a lesson, that's okay, but you should not have any students in the pictures, and make sure that we're not naming things out. An example, if I was recording right now and then I would say, hey, Mike, I know you have an IEP and you need extra time for reading, that would violate his FERPA rights because I'm sharing his disability with the whole class, recording it, and then if I send that recording, who knows who else is on there. And if he was on my picture, they would know who his first name and last name and can identify who Mike is. So we really try to work with teachers to be aware, especially when they're recording those sessions. And keep everything private. I don't know how many we can just, nowadays a lot of them, and I'm sure you guys know this, it's all in a system. The student has their own password. They can log in and look at their grades. So we're not posting anything. Everything is pretty much for the student to review and know. So we talked about recording. Be careful about recording. Social media. So especially we've seen a lot of teachers develop Facebook pages of their classes, and they use those to share information to parents. Hey, on Friday, December 9th, we have a field trip to such and such a place. And only the good thing is most of them, only the parents that are in their student in their class have access to that Facebook account. But what we've seen is sometimes teachers posting things that are not appropriate, and now the whole group of parents knows about that student. So just be aware what you're posting on social media. Make sure a lot of our parents don't like pictures of their students posted on social media unless they're aware. So we try to tell teachers stay away from those. We need to get consent from the parent, at least inform them. And I will tell you some of the stories that they tell us, and I understand, has to do with more safety. Examples, we have situations where the family, the mom may have been removed from the home and taking the child because of an abusive situation, and the parent right now does not know where they are and they want to keep it that way. And also now on social media, the father can identify the student, the school, and we've had parents show up and try to check out students that were not their legal guardian, and we had to stop a couple of them. But they found out information through social media. That's how they found out the location of the student. So just be aware of what we're posting on social media. And the best advice I can tell you, if you have any doubts, anything doesn't sit right, get consent or ask somebody. Make sure you have some kind of consent to share information, or ask somebody. I'd rather be dealing with an angry parent that we didn't give them what they wanted in a timely manner than dealing with a parent that we gave them the wrong information to the wrong parent. So sometimes school administrators call me and we'll talk through it. We'll walk through it, and I tell them if we're not sure, it's okay to wait till the next day and get the right information. I feel like nowadays everybody wants it right now and it's immediate and we get it. But if we're not sure and it just doesn't feel, we're not sure we should be sharing information or not, it's okay to say we'll get back to you, and share, have that conversation with your school administrator, because every time, you never know, like I said, you never know who's the next person who's going to file the complaint. It's always interesting how all the cases and how situations come about. So before I go to the next section, is there any questions yet, or should I keep going?
You can keep going. Nobody asked yet.
Okay, so this is kind of some participation, and I'm gonna pull up, you guys, if you can, in the chat box would be the best way. We're gonna have a couple of true and false questions. So if you can type in, and then somebody can tell me what the majority of the questions is, because I can't see right now. So one of them is, when a student turns 18 years old, the rights of birth are transferred to the parent. The student must obtain consent from, the parent must obtain consent, the school must obtain consent from the parent, from the student, to disclose grades and other education records. So is this true or false?
I see a lot of truths coming.
So I'm going to tell you, and I work a lot with attorneys, and this is what the response that a lot of attorneys will tell you. And the answer is, it's going to be, it depends. It actually depends if the parents are still claiming the student for taxes purposes. And that's hard. You may not know that. That's when school administrators get involved and we have phone calls with the parents. But like I said, sometimes it's hard to, it's not very black and white. So you always want to stop and think about it. I will tell you, you will have 18-year-olds at your secondary schools claiming this and telling them, don't talk to my parent, you have to talk to me. And before you go down that rabbit hole, make sure your school administrator is involved so we can actually look into it. But yeah, it's going to depend on that, on if the parents claim. Now, we do have students who are completely independent. They're living on their own, and they're 18 years old and they're going to school, then yeah, the parents will have no right to those records. So in a legal separation or divorce situation, both parents have the right to gain access to the student's educational records.
I see one true. Let's see, more people answer. It depends on how the divorce went, depends on the rights that have of the child, depends on if they both have the rights still.
So I'm gonna go yes for the majority, but yes, unless they have revoked, and those are very rare. There are very rare instances that a parent's rights have been revoked. They may not have custody of the child, but their parent rights have not been revoked. We have parents who live in different states. Student and the mom may live in Florida in our district. Dad may live in Virginia. They're divorced. She has custody, full-time custody, but he still has right to those records. We would still have to provide him copies, access to those records if he requested them. So unless we have something in writing that says otherwise, we pretty much assume both parents have legal right to those records. So a school may designate and disclose any information on a student as directory information as long as the school notifies parents and provides them with an opportunity to opt out.
Couple of truths and more truths coming.
So, and I'm looking at this. Mike, I'm sorry, there's a quarantine issue, COVID issue coming. My phone keeps blowing out. It's a COVID issue, but I have time to finish. I just lost my train of thought. So we talked about a school may designate. So I think that should be true. Actually, the slide is wrong and you guys are correct. So that should be true as long as we have give the parents the right to say that they don't want to share the information. We can't share that directory information. So I'm going to have to change the slide when I'm done here today. So the next one, teachers may post grades by student name or social security number.
A lot of false.
Okay, good. Yes, you cannot publicly do it by student's name or social security number. You can just do it if they post it. Now, when I got my bachelor's degree was a long time ago. I will tell you that back then when we had our college ID, it was our social security number. So things have changed pretty quickly because I remember that's how I memorized my social security number because it was my student ID in college. But yes, we shouldn't be assigning that information with those grades with a social security number. So to be considered an education record, it must be maintained in the student's CUME file or permanent record.
I have a true and a false.
Actually false. So an education record can be anything. Just because it's not filed in that CUME does not mean it's not an educational record. I'll give you an example. Lesson plans. Attorneys and parents will want to look at your lesson plans to show what you wrote, how you provided services to a student, especially if they're a student with a disability. So they may ask for records of your lesson plans. And be careful what kind of notes you have on your lesson plans. The best teachers that I have actually have created their own little language on how they code things in their lesson plans. And that's great because nobody understands it except the teacher. But yeah, think about anything that you produce that has a student name at any point, even if it's sitting on your desk, that could become an educational record as long as if somebody else has seen it. If it's your personal notes and nobody else has seen them, you can keep those. But in some court cases, when we've got into difficult situations, a judge may subpoena your own personal notes. So as a director, I have personal notes that I keep in regards to situations and cases that I deal with. I know that even when I write those personal notes and nobody has seen them, I'm aware that at any point a judge can call and subpoena me and ask me to bring my personal notes and produce them. So just be careful with what you're writing because it always comes back. And the big one I'm going to tell you right now is email. Be careful what you put in an email. Your emails, especially if you start working for a school system, those are all public records. Anybody can have access to all of these. Everybody has access to those emails. So be aware of what you put in emails. And I'll give you a couple of examples when I've dealt with cases that attorneys have requested email, and we're talking about a specific student. In that email, the conversation started with the student and let's say the ESE teacher and the gen ed teacher having conversations about how the student is doing and how they can help the student. That same email, because all you do is hit reply, 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 and they're replying back and forth. Also, that conversation turned into what they were doing Friday night, where they were meeting for drinks after work. And it's all in that same email that had that student number. So when the attorney asks for the request, that same email comes out and it has all that information that has nothing to do with the student, but we're required to give that information to that attorney the way it is. We can't redact it because it has nothing to do with other students. It's just two people having a personal conversation, but they left it in that same train that started off about a student. I tell teachers, get in a habit. After the third or fourth reply, start a new email. Because it gets forwarded, it gets replied, and then 50 people later, the email has become something else. So I try to say after 3 or 4 times, get in a habit of just writing a new email with whatever the new topic you're talking about now that is different from what you started with. So next question, school nurse records are not subject to FERPA, but are subject to the HIPAA privacy rule.
Sorry, I was muted. False.
Yes, it's false. Remember that those are education records and that you have access to them, but they're also protected under FERPA, so you shouldn't be sharing that information. So records created and maintained by a school resource officer or law enforcement are not subject to FERPA.
False, and Mike said maybe.
So Mike's right, because you probably saw this before. It depends what we use them for. You will have situations where your SRO, based on an investigation that started outside of the school, has created some notes and now it's led to an arrest of a student. And that's their records. It becomes a law enforcement record. We are not, as a school, have access to that, and we're not doing anything with those records. We don't even get copies of them. But if then they turn around and give us a report of their investigation, and we use that to maybe consider expelling the student from school, that becomes then an educational record, and the student and the parent have access to what was in those records. FERPA grants parents the right to have a copy of any education record.
True. And one false.
Depends. Here's why. Usually, if a parent has access to come inspect the records, we don't have to give them a copy of the records. So FERPA says they have the right to inspect and review, not a right to get copies. But if the parent cannot easily come and inspect and review the records, then we need to make an effort to make those copies. Think of the example that I gave you. The mom lives in Florida, custody of the student, dad lives in Virginia. Mom has the right to come in and review and inspect the records, we don't have to give her copies because she has access to the records. Whereas dad, it lives in Virginia, there's no way he's going to be able to come here to review and inspect records. So we would then provide him copies of the records. So it's going to depend, and a lot of this conversation, and the reason we talk about this, if mom wanted copies, as a district, we have procedures where we would charge her for the copies of any records that she wanted. Whereas dad, we wouldn't, because he doesn't have access to come and access the record. So again, it would be one of those that you would talk to your school administrator and figure out depending on the parent. So that is all I have. Ooh, Mike, I took longer than I thought.
I was gonna say 10 minutes now, but you're good.
Okay, so if you guys have any questions about anything that you would like for me to answer?
The one thing I'll mention was regarding the email. You know, I don't know, we say it over and over and over again about emails, but it is still an issue, right? People put all kinds of stuff in email. So, you know, every time you hit send on an email, you have to ask yourself, is this something that I'd be okay for it to be on Facebook, on
Channel 6
you
News is
know,
what
Channel
I
6
say.
News, you know, I'm trying to, you know, I would always go back to the newspaper, but nobody reads the newspaper anymore, right? So I'm trying to be kind of trendy. So, but any kind of social media platform, would you be okay for the whole world to see? Because that's basically what you're doing when you hit send on an email, because there's nothing private, and don't think that you just because you delete it, that it's gone, right? You know, your districts can claim emails from years and years ago, whether you deleted it or not. It's always there, right? It's always there to be searched and private record. So just be very careful, because you know, it can be very embarrassing if you're talking about another staff member or talking about a parent. You know, that's all going to come to light, and it just takes the parent to say, hey, here's $20. That's all it costs, and it's very easy. You know, if a parent gets upset, they know, many of them know, that all they have to do is ask for a public records request, and then just ask for, you know, emails that you have sent. So it is very easy for the parent to get those emails. So just be very cautious about what you end up putting in writing.
Mike, the other thing is text messaging. I know nowadays that is the easiest way and the most convenient way to communicate with parents. Treat text messages just like email, just like if you wrote something. When parents like you and love you, they will say there's no problem. But you have no idea when parents then get upset about something. I get emails of screenshots of text messages, conversation from our teacher to the parent with inappropriate conversations that probably were not professional. But at that point, they liked each other. They hung out after school hours with each other. It was like not a big deal until it becomes a big deal. And then when I usually just deal with the student part of it and how it affects the student. But then I turn that out over to labor relations and HR, and they deal with the teacher part of it. So just be very careful. I know it's the easiest way to communicate, but always be aware of what you put in writing, because it's there. Anybody can go back and look at it.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. You were probably going to read that question, right?
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting one. They were just saying, if you're in a PLC team, like with your school, like you know, we have 3 teachers kind of texting each other within a PLC team. Is that considered public record?
Like I said, FERPA has not caught up to technology. Unless somebody tells us about it, we wouldn't know about it. It would be very hard to prove. But I would recommend that if you think there's something that shouldn't be said, let's not put it in writing. I will tell you, sometimes when principals send me stuff, I pick up the phone and I call them. I'm not responding in email. I'm not putting anything in writing. Sometimes I kept telling people it's easier just to pick up the phone, have that conversation. And sometimes email and text messaging, the intent gets lost. People interpret it differently. And sometimes it's just easier to pick up the phone and have those conversations than put things in writing. And I will tell you, like in my world, exceptional student education, parent can go back up to 2 years when they filed a complaint or a legal action. So 2 years from now, you may not remember what was said, the intent, and how it's hard to recall 2 years. I mean, sometimes a week it's hard to recall the details. So sometimes we're looking at back and the only thing that we have is what's in writing. Because we can pull those emails from 2 years ago and see what's in writing. And then we have to ask teachers, can you explain why this was written the way it was? And that's very hard position to put teachers in.
Well, you got a lot of kudos, Dr. Fontan, for your presentation. So I'm glad that I felt very strongly that they would appreciate the information. That seems to be the case. So thank you so much for taking the time to put it in here and to provide the information for these students. And I think I shared the same thing at the last time we met with this group of things not to say as a teacher. And, you know, Dr. Fontan has probably had to deal with this where a parent tells a teacher that, you know, my student has an IEP or 504, and then the teacher says, oh, I didn't know they had a 504 or an IEP. You know, you never want to say those words because that all of a sudden that creates a lot of work for Dr. Fontan and her team. So just work, you know, talk around that and then get the IEP and figure out what you're supposed to be doing in that classroom, because that's in a whole nother topic of discussion. Well, I guess
So if there are no other question, I would like to thank Dr. Fontan for the amazing information. I learned so much today. And to Mike Alba to bring all these amazing people that we have all this time. I want to invite our participants to the next KnightED talk that is Tuesday the 13th. It's communication boards, and Wednesday is about OCPS induction. Remember to complete the form to get your certificate, and see you in the next one. Thank you, guys.
Hi guys,
Thank you.
have a good week.